Okay, I'm here. So excited because I love baking and I love teaching. So all of you asked me to show you sourdough bread, no knead method, and I'm going to show you from very start to very finish. So I will post all the recipes on my blog. So look down below for the link to the recipes. I got the recipes from two different places. The first place I got the recipe was from the kitchensomething.com, and that place has the sourdough starter, which I'm going to show you really quick. And then the no knead recipe is actually in this amazing book. They don't talk about sourdough in their book, but I just took some clues and replaced the yeast in the no knead recipe with sourdough, and it worked. So I'm going to show you how to do it. So the first thing you need to do is make a starter or get a starter. I have a nice starter here. It's really bubbly. I keep it in the fridge generally, unless I'm ready to use it. Then I take it out the day before. Right now it's super bubbly and happy. So I'm going to show you how to use it. And then I'm going to feed it and put it back in the fridge. But to make it, I used this bowl. It seems to be big enough to make your starter in. And you have to take 5 days, 5 straight days to make it before you can really use it. And the way to make it is you take somewhat equal parts flour and water. The recipe calls for actually 4 ounces. And I used my mail scale because I send out mail, so I always have a mail scale. So I use that. So you do 4 ounces of flour with 4 ounces of water. If you don't have a scale, use 3/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of flour plus a 1/2 cup of water, or weigh it for sure. If you can get a scale, they're $20. Otherwise, you don't need a scale. So you're going to do that the first day, and then you're going to put it in your kitchen, not where there's a lot of hot direct heat or really cold area, just kind of in an area. I put it up above on the refrigerator, and you cover it. It's best to cover it with a cloth like this because what's happening is the flour and the water the yeasts are coming into it from the air. The yeasts are actually from the air. So you don't want it sealed or it won't ever work. So it ferments and then the yeasts come from the air as well. So you put that on there. Second day, you do the same amount, 4 ounces and 4 ounces. Mix it in. Third day, you do the same amount, 4 ounces. So you do that 4 times until you have the 5th day, and it'll start about 3rd day. It'll start bubbling. At day 5, it's ready to use. You do want to feed it one more time, or let it sit a little more, possibly. But if it's super bubbly, you're good to go. Now here's a clue. The yeasts love to eat from rye flour. I happen to find dark rye flour at the grocery store right now, which is kind of crazy. So I started my sourdough with the rye flour, and then every once in a while I add white. Sometimes I add rye, but I always make sure there's some rye flour in my starter because it really makes the sourdough happy or bubbly. So that's how you do that. For every package or a tablespoon and a half of yeast, you're going to use a cup of sourdough starter. So the basic no-knead bread, you need a big container. It makes 2 loaves. You don't have to bake both loaves right away. What I generally do is make a loaf and then put the rest in the fridge, and it refrigerates fine for a few days, like 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then you can use the second one. In fact, it gets more sourdoughy the longer it sits in the fridge, which is kind of fun and yummy. So what I do is I have my empty container, and I don't really clean it out because you want the fermented dough in there anyway from the last batch. This is my last batch. You can use this kind of bowl as well, as long as and if you want to, you just don't want something where it's like super secure, the lid, because it does bubble up. Like this lid can pop off from the bubbling and let the air escape if need be. So you just want to remember that you can use this type of bowl to mix in. So what you want to do is you want to use flour, salt, your sourdough, and water. And that's all you want to do. It's very easy. You're just gonna mix it up only, and then you're gonna let it sit. So let's start mixing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add our flour, which is 6.5 cups of flour. So here we go. 1, 2, 12, and 13. Yay! And of course I get myself messy. I'm notoriously messy when I make things. All right, so we got our flour. We're gonna put our starter in. It's a cup of starter. So I'm just gonna pour it out. See how gooey it is. And I don't want to lose all that starter. So let's make sure we scoop it out. That's the stuff that makes it work. Okay. Now I'm gonna put this back in. We're gonna feed my starter before we go on. So if you don't use starter for your no-knead bread, you can use your yeast, 1.5 tablespoons of yeast. All right. This recipe calls for 1.5 tablespoons of salt. We found that to be pretty salty for our bread. It does need the salt to eat it from, but you don't want it too salty. So what I've been doing is doing like a huge scoop of tablespoon, and that seems to be fine. So I'm going to put that in there. And then we're going to add 3 cups of water. So here's the water. I just use tap water. You can use a filtered water. You want it to be kind of room temperature, not too cold, not too hot. That doesn't really matter because what you're gonna do is you're gonna mix this up and it's gonna be really wet. The secret to actually really good bread is wet dough. You want the water in there. That's one of the things that makes those beautiful, luscious bubbles when it cooks. Those bubbles are formed from the steam as the water evaporates out as it bakes. So you definitely want that in there. And let me mix it up and then I'll see. Here is what your dough should look like, thick, gloppy, wet. So we're gonna put it in this container, we're gonna cover it up, and we're gonna let it sit for 2 hours. You can even let it sit for 3 hours. Like if you go out, just let it sit, start it in the morning, go out, come back. You can put it in the fridge. Actually, it's best to put it in the fridge because it's so sticky, it's easier to handle when it's cold. So I put it in the fridge after the 2 hours, after I make sure it starts bubbling. And then we're gonna take it out and we're gonna form it into a ball and we're gonna let that sit in the fridge for another 2 or 3 hours. And then we're gonna bake it. Now we're gonna feed our starter. I don't have too much left. I don't know if you can see it, but it's just down to here. So it's a little less than a cup. I don't like feeding it every day because it just gets too much, and then you have to throw it away unless you want to give it to somebody. So I might leave it out tonight, feed it one more day, and then stick it in the fridge until I need it again. Don't forget when you want to use it, you have to pull it out of the fridge the night before and let it bubble and warm up before you can put it in your dough for your bread, because it probably won't work as well. Because we're going to put it on my scale. I use the weight method because there is moisture in the air, and every day has a different moisture content, which means the flour has moisture and the whatever's in here is going to have a different moisture level and everything. And so when you use weight, things weigh differently every day. So you just want to make sure that you have that weight. And so I'm going to turn it on and put my thing on so it'll zero out. And then I'm going to put my rye flour. Today we're going to feed it rye flour until it says 4 ounces, which is actually quite a lot. I'm almost there. 3, 4. No, not quite. There we go. go over a little, it's not a big deal. Just to match the ounces. And then I'm going to put my water in until it says 8 ounces. There we go. And then I'm going to just take this and stir it up until it's nice and gushy. It's going to be thicker than what you saw me pour out. So just remember that. But it will be very, very, almost like slime, I would say, is the closest thing. And it will be yummy, and it's going to love that rye flour for sure. And I just keep it covered like this when it's doing its work, and that way any air needs to escape, it can just kind of move the lid or whatever. Let that sit, and it will keep making your sourdough happy and alive. So I have my dough here. We're going to put it in a bowl, or you can also do it in a proofing basket. This is a proofing basket. This one's long so that I can make a loaf out of it. But I'm going to show you the bowl method because everybody has a glass Pyrex bowl laying around and a white or a cotton kitchen towel. And you really want to coat this with flour. And you can see I have fully coated this with flour. You want more flour than you think because you don't want your dough to stick when you take it out of the proofing bowl. So we're going to take this off. My dough is nice and puffy now after it sat overnight in the fridge. It sat on the counter for 2 hours and then I put it in the fridge for overnight. So we're going to use half of this to make a loaf. So I'm going to mark it in half. I'm going to use a little bit of flour on my hands and around the edges just to help me because this gets really sticky. And we're going to pull. I like to squeeze it with my fingers and pull out. Just, you kind of got to be aggressive and quick. And now what I'm doing is I'm rolling it into a ball. And you want the pinch of the ball on the top and the ball part on the bottom of your proofing basket. And then we're going to leave it, we're going to cover it up a little bit just lightly with the towel. And then we're going to leave it in the fridge for 2 to 4 hours for it to come back for the, when you push on dough, the elasticity, you lose the elasticity and you lose the air. So you want that to come back. You want it to rest and become more pliable again before you bake it. So we're going to let that rest for 2 to 4 hours in the fridge. You want to do it in the fridge, you can bake straight out of the fridge, and that's the great part. Or you can even do it overnight. I've done it overnight and it's fine. So like if you want fresh bread for dinner, great thing to do. Put it in overnight, take it out for dinner, bake it, and you got a fresh loaf of bread. Also, I just wanted to tell you that you can use this other half, just put it back in the fridge, use it whenever. Next day, next couple of days. So let's talk about baking it before we get our dough and bake it out. So what we have is I've pulled out the different varieties of things I've used to bake my bread. I have now adopted using my Dutch oven, which I got from an estate sale for nothing. But I've adopted using that because I find that makes the best crust on my bread. But there's different ways. If you don't have a Dutch oven, it's not the end of the world. You can do it. You do need something like a skillet or something like this. I use this pan a lot for my bread. In fact, in the long basket I showed you, that's what I put on this bread. And maybe in another video, I'll show you how I do that. But you can use this and some aluminum foil to cover it, or you can use this open with a hotel pan like this, and you just put this in the bottom and then a cup of hot water and close the oven, and the hot water will help form the crust as well. But I find my crust is best in a covered Dutch oven, or covered with aluminum foil. Or you can do 2 if you have a deep one of these. You can do 2 pans on top of each other. You just want enough room for it to rise. So those are your options. So what you want to do is you want to turn your oven on to 500 degrees, and also put your Dutch oven or your whatever you're going to use to bake it on in the oven for at least 20 minutes. After it comes to temperature, after your oven beeps, put on a timer for 20 minutes and let that heat up, because you want that hot pan to touch the dough instantly and do its thing. So I'm going to put that in the oven, and then we'll take it out and put the dough in and show you how to do that. Okay, so let's put our bread that we made in the bowl. This is straight from the fridge. So what I want to do is actually take this top off, and I'm just going to put this aside here, like that. And then I have found that if I just put it in my hand like that, and see, I put enough flour on there so it doesn't stick, and because it's cold, it's easier. And then you want to slit, because you want that bread to be nice and open so that the steam can come out. And then we're going to just plop it in here and cover it up right away. So we can get this hot pan. So we're going to cover it up and stick it in the oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes, and then you just turn it down to 450 for another 10 minutes. Take the top off, and you'll see that it's risen. And you want to cook it probably between 20 and 30 minutes till it's pretty brown, but I'll show you, we'll take it out together. I'll show you. There's a sound that the bottom needs to make, and we can listen to the sound when we take it out of the oven. Alrighty, so here he goes. Okay, so let's try this baking method together. I have a just standard iron skillet, and I have my dough that we put in here, and it's been sitting in the refrigerator for about 3 hours. And I have some 2 things of aluminum foil, which I'm going to kind of fold over the edges and make it so that they can sit on top of each other. We want it as tight as possible, so the 2 pieces work better than just one. So I'm going to take it out, and what I'm going to do is just let it fall in my hands. Ooh, this stuck a little bit. And then I'm going to slit the top while it's in my hands. It's easier to slit it while it's in your hands. Ooh, it's very sticky today. So put that down in there, and then let me go wash my hands. I possibly should have put some flour on top so that it didn't stick to my hands so much, but that's okay. We're gonna see how it comes out together. This is how I learned, so I will share it with you. So I'm gonna put this one on top here, like this, and then I'm gonna put this one going the other way, my creases, and then I'm gonna take my mitts, because this is a very, very hot pan, and I'm going to try to let there be air. You want enough room for it to expand, but you also want it to be tight. So you want, there we go. So we'll put this in the oven, and we'll do the same thing. We'll do 20 minutes on 500, turn it down to 450, and then I'll take it out and we'll look at it after the 10 minutes at 450 and uncovering it. Okay, so now we are at 30 minutes, 20 for 500 degrees and 10 for 450 with the lid on. We're gonna take the lid off, and this is how big it puffed up to be. And it's just starting to bake fully. So we're gonna leave it in the oven for another 20 to 40 minutes, depending. So I'm gonna put it on 20 minutes, and then I'll pull it out and show you what it looks like at 20 minutes at 450 degrees. So here's the one that I did, I did in the pan with the aluminum foil. As you can see, it didn't rise as much. I think it's because I pulled on it a little bit, but it probably is pretty good. I'm gonna cut into it. Let's see what this one looks like cut into. always, the crust is always so hard on the bottom, which is not a bad thing. So as you can see, it didn't puff up as much as the other one. You'll see the other one next. So I like that method better, but it's still a great bread. So you can play around with how you want to bake your bread in the oven, but probably the thing that went wrong for me wasn't the aluminum foil method. It was probably because I let it stick to my hands. So more flour. Flour the better. I should have sprinkled flour on top. Lesson learned. And let's look at the other one and we'll taste it. Okay, that's 20 minutes more. Let's see what it looks like. The color looks good. So the way I test it and the way a lot of people test it is you hold the bread upside down, and if you tap, it sounds like it's hollow. And that's a good bake on the bread. So as you can see, it's pretty dark. It could go maybe 5 minutes more, it'll get even darker, but I think we are in a good spot for the bread. And so here's your sourdough. It came from out of that little bowl into this. The other secret is do not cut your bread right out of the oven. It's still baking. So you need to let it sit and cool for a while, maybe another half hour or so before you cut into it. Warm bread sounds amazing to me, but it's still doing its baking, and you don't want it to get chewy when you cut into it too early and expose all the steam that's built up in it, and it's so hot inside that you want it to do the rest of its job, which is baking from the inside. So I will put it on a cutting board and we will eat it later. We'll cut it open together and eat it and have a taste. So it's been an hour, bread is warm. Let me get my butter. And a knife. Here we go. We're gonna open him up. See his beautiful crust. Hear it. It's my favorite part about bread baking. Look at those beautiful puffy. Definitely could have gone a little longer, I think, in the oven. I should have let it go for another 5 or 10 minutes, but it's fine. I'm going to take a nice piece. We're gonna have avocado toast tonight. This is the best bread for avocado toast, especially in its current form. Look at that. Look at those nice puffy air holes. I will cut a piece. Some butter. Oop, a little too much there. That's okay, we'll use it for something else. There we go. A little butter. Oh, so good. I hope you guys succeed in your bread making. I hope this helps. I'm talking with my mouth full because it's really crunchy. But let me know if you need any other help answering questions. Comment below. Subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing Bob's Buns next, which is a favorite. I'll tell you the story from start to finish as we're making Bob's Buns. See you next time.